Our first speaker will be Ken Malloy, then we'll have Doug Southgate, then Russell Seitz, and then Leon Lowe. They're not seated in the order that they'll be speaking. And I'm going to sit down there and enforce things time-wise. So we'll, without further ado, Ken, please start your presentation.
Okay.
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chump some of this shit. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
We're going to need a bigger boat. Why are we running out of oil? I'm here with the energy presentation. I think most of you know why we're running out of oil. We have oil in Texas, Oklahoma, and Alaska, but unfortunately all the dipsticks are in Washington. I have just started this organization called the Center for the Study of Carbon and Energy Markets. I used to run an organization called the Center for the Advancement of Energy Markets, which focused on electricity restructuring. And then Rob Bradley, who's sitting in the back there, convinced me that there was a threat to the globe that required me to refocus my attention. And so as a consequence, I recently founded this organization, Center for the Study of Center for the Study of Carbon and Energy Markets. And this is actually the first speech that I'm making in that context. Basically, what I'm looking at are the threats to energy markets posed not only by climate change, but also a lot of the idiocy that passes for national security policy. And my little slogan for what I believe in is good intentions do not justify bad policy. And unfortunately, we have a lot of bad policy. Oh, I know what I was supposed to turn this around. Sorry, thank you. Okay, so let me just run through the commercial. Basically, we're founded recently, research and analysis. Our characters that were independent, market-oriented, nonprofit, change agency, think tank, not a lobbying group, a trade association, a consulting firm. And at least so far, we haven't taken any funds from government energy corporations or energy foundations. Our mission is basically AID, a clever acronym, analyze the issues, inform policymakers, and defend real competition. A couple years ago, Public Utility Fortnightly named me one of 5 energy innovators, ringing in an age of enlightenment. It's the only credential I really have for this. What's it like being a CEO to an energy markets think tank? This is how I feel most of the time, especially in the advent of Enron. What's my thesis? My thesis is that U.S. energy markets are fraught with peril. We do have real energy problems. I don't want to be a denier in that sense and say we don't have energy problems. We have real energy problems, but many of the proposals that are put forward are terrible policy, self-interested, or outright fraud, and that there's a powerful coalition to undermine the future. The political parties, in my opinion, and I am a Ronald Reagan Republican. I came to Washington in 1981 to serve in his administration, but I am so dismayed by what passes for Republican policy these days. The political parties are paralyzed by their constituencies and have incoherent visions on this issue. There is a silver bullet, and that's radical reliance on markets and competition. Why did I start the center? The dialogue on energy just didn't make sense to me. I'd spent 25 years of my life passionately studying energy policy, and what I was hearing from every authoritative organ made absolutely no sense to me. You had the Brookings Institute, it started. I attended a conference where they had a chief of staff, John Podesta, 2 secretaries of energy, Altman and Rubin, a deputy secretary of defense, Deutsch, Kathleen McGinty, chair of the CEQ. And I looked at that, and it was all on climate change alarmism. And I looked at it and I said, what would it take to get anything approaching that caliber of individual to a conference on energy markets? I realized it was impossible. So that was starting to concern me. Then I saw the college jamboree in Washington, 5,000 kids jumping up and down for radical changes to their lives because of climate change. Then I looked at the Chamber of Commerce. I said, surely I have friends here. And James Schlesinger, first Secretary of Energy. Dan Yergin, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for the prize. And what I saw was a timidity among these important people on issues relating to fundamental quality of life in the United States that it really distressed me. Then, Gore was on a roll. I can't imagine what other prize he could possibly win. I keep my girlfriend away from him. She's sitting right over here because I'm afraid, he's so popular. Republican neocons. This was the ultimate disappointment. I looked at what the Republican neocons were saying about oil. They're all worried about oil coming from the Middle East, that they're willing to intervene as aggressively in energy markets as the worst socialist Democrat is. And I said, the world is going crazy. There's some of the names. By the way, Watkins is the former Secretary of Energy in the Bush 1 administration that I served under.
Is that
Boyden Gray, yes, the current ambassador to the European Union, yeah. And again, I worked with Boyden Gray in the Reagan administration, and I think the guy's a hero, but he was crazy on this topic. And yes, I looked all of the Republican and Democratic presidential candidates had the words energy independence or some facsimile thereof, and were just completely backward on this. So I felt like a voice crying in the wilderness. Where is Hayek? Where is Friedman? I cannot tell you what I felt today to hear the president of the Czech Republic stand up there and give a speech that on a concept that has given meaning to my life for the last 30 years, ever since that day when the scales fell. I was a communist in college, unabashedly. I was a liberal Democrat in law school, but then the scales fell from my eyes, and I understood the implications of markets and freedom, and it was so refreshing to hear that today. All right, I'm going to rush through this because they're probably going to keep me to my time. Troubled waters undermine energy markets. We have the four horsemen of the energy apocalypse: blackouts, increasing global demand and prices, oil imports, and climate change. And when I say undermine energy markets, I don't mean these are problems necessarily, but they erode people's confidence that we ought to rely on markets as opposed to government bureaucrats. And then there's the death of 1,000 duck bites. I won't go into them, but it's just over and over. Anything you hear in the press, anything is negative when it comes to energy markets. There is good news, however. I just saved a bunch of money on my car insurance by switching to Geico. Here's books published since 2000. I did a quick review. 35 books with energy crisis as the focus since 2000. Not environmental renewables or hydrogen or climate change. Purely energy books. Vast majority are crisis-oriented and apocalyptic. Only 3 show confidence in markets and human ingenuity. Sorry. Just look at some of these titles: Resource Wars, Energy Revolution, Blood and Oil, Crossing the Rubicon, Oil, Jihad, and Destiny. And then here's just the next group of them: The High and Mighty, The End of Oil, End of Suburbia, Final Energy Crisis. I only found 3 that passed my test of good scholarly thinking about this. One was Peter Huber's Bottomless Well, and I strongly recommend that book to you. Second was the author right back there, Rob Bradley, Energy, the Master Resource. And I thank Rob publicly for being at this conference and for all of the leadership that he has shown over the years in being an unabashed proponent for markets. But I do want to highlight one book today, and that is Gusher, Robert Bryce's Gusher of Lies, The Dangerous Delusions of Energy Independence. Came out Monday. Brand spanking new. I put a green review that I did for the book. This book, I was despairing over the last year that this made sense to care about this stuff. This book reinvigorated me about what it is that energy policy is all about. Let's be careful out there. Let's not do this. U.S. energy reality is more dire than in '73. Only natural gas has significantly improved since '73. How many of you remember 1978 Fuel Use Act that outlawed the use of natural gas in many of the applications that we're using them today? Literally outlawed it. It was illegal. You could go to jail if you used natural gas for certain uses. We got that reversed in the Reagan administration in '87. Where would we be today if we couldn't use natural gas because we rely on market forces and deregulated in the Reagan administration? It's really oil that screws us up in our thinking. I've analyzed President Bush's speeches and the Secretary of Energy speeches, and I look for the word competition, deregulation, or the word markets used as a policy prescription. Guess what? I can't find it. My experience at DOE is that when politicians from Texas or Wyoming view energy policy, they view it as holes in the ground, natural gas reform. They don't view it comprehensively the way that it ought to be. Pudding has no theme. Both parties have an implicit gentleman's agreement. This was the ultimate frustration for me. Republicans are just as command and control as Democrats, only they've got a different set of friends. Their command and control is big oil, big utilities, big, hard energy resources. We like to see things being built. And they're willing to distort markets to do it. Democrats, a command and control for demand and efficiency, CAFE standards, we want to tell you what kind of light bulbs you should have, etc. Both parties agree to feather each other's nest. They cancel out each other's hot button issue, typically Anwar and CAFE, and then they conspire to command and control of supply and demand. California is a good example of this kind of consensus. How many of you remember what got Arnold Schwarzenegger elected? It was the California energy crisis. Is there anybody, there was 114 people, I have 5 minutes? Oh, I'm doing great. There's 114 people that voted, senators and assemblymen, for the California bill that brought down Gray and brought down California in terms of its energy crisis. Does anybody want to hazard a guess as to what the vote was out of 114 on the bill that was the worst energy disaster in North America in the last 25 years? No votes. 114 to 0. Because what happened, everybody got their nest feathered and nobody was looking for the consumer, competition, markets, and rationality. So when someone says to you, we need a consensus on something, there's an example of a consensus. Pox on both their houses. Neither party embraces strong market policy. Energy legislation's embarrassment. It's just a hodgepodge of subsidies, distortions, and new impediments to markets. Goal should be to remove impediments to markets. Wasn't sure I would support the last energy bill, but then I saw they extended daylight savings time and lowered to lower oil use and outlawed the incandescent bulb. And I said, that's good policy. Let me climb on. CAFE is not the answer. Read this in Huber's book. I hadn't realized it. If you lower the cost of each incremental mile traveled, is a consumer going to drive more or less? They're going to drive more. So CAFE standards increase the amount of miles that consumers are going to drive. Okay? That's the exact opposite of what's intended. That's what I just said. Pictures. All right, pictures of negotiation in the final bill. Okay, for those of you from urban centers, those are pigs, okay, and that's pork, okay? We do have a proposal, and I think this is a very important contribution. Unlimited refund so consumers recover entirely from wrong energy decisions, and the acronym for that is you are screwed. Do we have an oil import problem? Suppose, and in fact, where do we get most of our oil from today that's imported? From Canada and Mexico, not from dangerous terrorist Arabs. So we are virtually energy independent in that sense. But would anything change if we were completely independent? No. Japan imports everything. Great Britain imports nothing. North Shore. Is either of their economies not affected by a $100 barrel of oil? No. I mean, unless you think that Texas is so philanthropic that they're going to keep the price down to 30, oil is oil, and when prices go up for everybody. So imports. Next time somebody says oil imports are a problem, tell them they're full of it. Oil imports are not the problem. Oil dependency does have an impact because the more oil you use for GDP, the more you're going to be affected by shifting prices. But we use a lot less oil per unit of GDP today than we did in 1973. So oil imports are not a problem. All right. You know what? I see we're going. Let me just. Oh. Who was that? Okay, I'm going to have all of his 15 minutes. But I do feel bad, so let me give you $5 and purchase them in advance. We're going to have a minutes trading system here, cap and trade. All right, we have a supply problem, but we have plenty of supply of energy in the United States. I'm sorry, in the world. Shale, tar sands. Does anybody have any idea how much tar sands gas there is just above Calgary? I mean, enough for the next 200 years. It's hard to get at, yes. It's labor intensive, energy intensive to get at, but we do not have energy shortages. What we have are limitations on human ingenuity and access to those energy resources. So don't believe we have an energy supply problem. Producers are willing to take risks. So producers are willing to take risks. But we do have a demand problem. Our problem is that we don't have technologies that allow us to use energy efficiently, or at least the optimum amount. And my point here is we don't price energy correctly, okay? Most of you probably live in states where your electricity is priced the same on the lowest day that you consume on the year as on the peak period. Well, what that does is it causes over-demand in the peak because everyone turns on the air conditioner, which means we have to build lots of new power plants. We don't send the right price signals by charging more at the peak, less at the off-peak, so that people could engage in rational fuel switching. And this is, I realize, going to get me in trouble with some of you in the audience, but in my opinion, we don't price gasoline correctly. I'd throw out the CAFE standards in a minute, and I would adopt a slightly more greater orientation toward energy taxes and price gasoline better in return for getting rid of those silly CAFE standards. Conservation efficiency. I have nothing against conservation efficiency. I love it, as long as it's driven by markets and rational consumer behavior, not by government dictate. And frankly, we don't do that. We more or less go in for things like outlawing light bulbs or requiring people not to use energy through CAFE standards or the like. All right, renewables, same thing. All right.
Crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
All right, actually, don't get up and go to your windows. Stay here and listen to them. All right, but are you mad as hell? Do you believe that freedom, liberty, competition, and markets solve our problems? Markets are, in my opinion, we're losing the battle. I think that was very evident in the remarks of the president this morning. Climate change and national security exacerbate our already precarious situation. We need a bigger boat. In fact, I think the next thing says this. This conference is an exciting beginning. I've never been a part of anything like this before. I feel so sort of rewarded, validated by much of what I've heard at this conference. So I hope things like this continue. Put your money where your mouth is.
Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
We clearly need leadership.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
All right. All that's necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Don't be afraid to take on challenges.
The tastiest, most tender salmon, which is exactly what
That's
we
me
at
back
John
there.
West want. John West endured the worst.
Perspectives unchanged. You all know Marx said politics is the art of looking for trouble, finding it everywhere, diagnosing it incorrectly, and applying the wrong remedies. That's Groucho, not Carl. Success is moving from failure to failure with great enthusiasm. That's the Venerable Winston Churchill. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. Gandhi.
Master, moving stones around is one thing. This is totally different.
No different. Only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No, try not. Do or do not. There is no try.
Okay, I think I'm almost okay. No, I'm not going to tell that joke. Thank you, and then I'll answer any. Hold it.
I'll ask you a few yes or no questions, and you just answer truthfully. Do you understand?
Yes.
I'll be happy to take questions when it's my turn.